The days blurred together in the palace, each sunrise bringing not relief, but a tightening coil of dread in Layla's chest. She began to notice things, little details that most servants pretended not to see. The Valide Sultan's most trusted eunuch, Hassan Aga, carried messages late at night, his robes whispering along marble corridors where no one was supposed to be. From the corner of her eye, Layla saw shadowy figures slipping into the imperial harem after the call to the final prayer, and not all of them were women. The gardens, once a place of sweet escape, began to feel like a prison yard. There were guards posted at every path, their scimitars catching the moonlight. The cypress trees seemed to whisper secrets to one another when the wind passed through. Rumors from the outside world never reached the harem directly, they came in fragments from kitchen servants, or in the hurried whispers of concubines who had overheard men talking from behind a screen. One night, Layla caught the words, "poison," for the Sultan, and "it must look like God's will," and then the speaker fell silent when he saw her passing. Life here was not just about beauty, it was about survival. Even a misplaced glance could be deadly. She had heard of a concubine who merely smiled at a visiting prince from a rival court, and by the next day, she had fallen ill and was buried in a shallow grave outside the city walls. One evening, Layla was summoned, not to the Sultan's chambers, but to the Valide Sultan's private quarters. The room was dim, lit only by the flicker of oil lamps. The air was thick with ambergris and rosewater, scents that clung to the Valide silk robes. Her voice was as smooth as honey but carried the weight of a blade. "Layla," she said, "you are clever. That makes you dangerous, or useful. Which do you wish to be?" Layla swallowed hard. "Useful, my lady." The Valide smiled, but it was not a smile of kindness. It was the smile of someone who had decided her fate long before the question was asked. "Good. The Sultan is troubled. His mind is distracted, his strength failing. There are those in the court who wish to replace him. I will not allow that. You will keep his attention on you. Feed him honeyed words, but listen closely to what he says in the dark." Layla understood at once. She was not being asked to serve as a lover, but as a spy. And in this palace, being caught between the Sultan's trust and the Valide's orders was like walking on a blade's edge. For weeks, she played her part. The Sultan was indeed distracted, by visions, by dreams that made him sit up in the night sweating, by a cough that no doctor could cure. In his weakened state, he spoke more than he should. Names slipped from his lips, names of pashas plotting in the shadows, of treaties that were being betrayed, of armies gathering on the empire's farthest borders. Layla remembered every word, even the ones she didn't understand. But the more she learned, the more she realized the Valide was not protecting the Sultan, she was protecting her own throne within the harem. The old woman's influence over the empire was greater than anyone dared admit. Ministers bowed lower to her than to the Sultan himself. And when someone opposed her, they vanished. The night Layla understood the true danger was the night she saw blood on the marble floor outside the Valide's door. The next morning, the Sultan's youngest concubine was declared dead from fever. But Layla knew fever left no trail of fresh blood. It was then she began to think not only of survival but of escape. The idea of escape was a dangerous thing to keep in one's mind. In the harem, even thoughts felt as though they were being watched. But Layla could not silence it. Every time she looked at the polished marble floors, she imagined running barefoot through the streets of Constantinople, breathing air that was not perfumed and poisoned with secrets. Her first step was to gather information not just about the Sultan and the Valide, but about the palace itself. At night, when the eunuchs dozed in the outer corridors, she studied the patterns in their patrols. She noticed which doors were locked and which were left slightly ajar. She began to speak to Fatima, one of the older laundresses, who had been in the palace for decades. Fatima's hands were rough from years of scrubbing silk, but her mind was sharp. "There are tunnels," Fatima whispered one night as they folded garments. "Older than the palace itself. Built in the days of Byzantium. They lead to the sea." Layla's pulse quickened. "Do you know where?" The old woman shook her head. "I only know this one begins somewhere in the Sultan's private baths. But child, those baths are guarded even when empty. And those who go looking for them," she didn't finish her sentence. She didn't need to. A week later, fate or perhaps danger opened a door for her. The Sultan summoned Layla to the baths late at night. He looked pale, his breathing labored, but his eyes were restless. He dismissed the attendants and told her to pour the water herself. As she worked, she noticed something strange, a crack in the wall beneath the marble bench, so fine it could have been mistaken for a shadow. But when her fingertips brushed it, she felt cool air. That night, she could barely sleep. She began to wonder, was the tunnel real? Or was this another trap laid by the Valai to test her loyalty? The next evening, she returned to the baths under the pretense of bringing the Sultan a scented cloth. The room was empty. Kneeling beside the crack, she pressed harder, searching for a catch. The marble shifted ever so slightly, revealing a black gap behind it. A wave of stale, salty air rushed out, smelling faintly of the sea. Her heart thundered. The tunnel existed. But before she could slip inside, a voice spoke from the shadows. "You're braver than I thought, Layla." She turned to see Hassan Aga, the Valaide's eunuch, standing with his arms folded. His eyes glinted like polished obsidian. "You think you can run from here?" he said softly. "Many have tried. Some were dragged back screaming. Some were never found at all. And some," he stepped closer, lowering his voice to a whisper. "Some learned the truth, and wished they had never been born." Layla's throat went dry. "What truth?" Hassan smiled thinly. "The Sultan you serve is not the rightful ruler. The real heir died years ago. What you see on that throne is a shadow, a puppet propped up by the Valide so she can rule in his name. And if you ever speak a word of this, you will be found floating in the Bosphorus before sunrise." Her knees felt weak. The world she thought she understood was gone. And suddenly, escape was not just a dream. It was the only way to survive. The storm over the Bosphorus had turned the night sky into a swirling canvas of black and silver. Inside the Topkapi Palace, the air was thick with incense and fear. The Sultan lay dying, whispers of poison in every corridor. Layla knew this was her last chance. With Hassan Aga's help, she slipped through the hidden tunnel she had discovered months ago. Every echo of her footsteps felt like a drumbeat of fate. Behind her, the harem's jeweled doors were shutting forever, but she knew if she stayed, those same walls would become her tomb. She reached the final gate, the smell of the sea pulling her forward. But just as freedom shimmered before her eyes, shadows emerged from the darkness, 2 palace guards, swords drawn, sent by the Valide Sultan herself. Hassan stepped forward, ready to fight, his voice breaking, "Run, Layla." The clash of steel filled the night. Layla's tears blurred the scene, but she didn't stop. She dove into the cold waters of the Bosphorus, the salt stinging her skin, the moon above her like a watchful eye. Behind her, a scream tore the silence, Hassan's final breath. She swam until the palace was just a shadow on the horizon. The waves carried her to a fishing boat, and the fishermen pulled her aboard, their eyes wide at the sight of the drenched, trembling woman with a stolen emerald ring clutched in her hand. No one ever saw Layla again in the empire. But in the markets of Venice, rumors spread of a veiled woman who told stories of the Ottoman harem, stories too dangerous to write, but too unforgettable to die. If you liked the story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share so more people can uncover the dark secrets of history.